2,900 attorneys have quit the Department of Justice or were fired during the first 10 months of this year. I believe a majority of that number were DOJ lawyers who quit. Think about that number as well. How many FBI agents quit or fired as well? A massive number there. We're seeing overall about triple or quadruple the number of people leaving the DOJ and FBI, either quitting or firing in any specific year, yet alone term at this point. Reuters was doing an analysis of those records, and it's having a devastating impact on cases as well. A federal magistrate judge in Washington, D.C., analyzed the dismissals of felony cases that have been brought by the DOJ in Washington, D.C., for example, over the past, I think like 60 or 90 days or so as well. And it was like basically like 20% of the cases resulted in dismissals versus if you looked at a historical perspective, it was less than like 0.5% of cases that are filed ultimately get dismissed by the DOJ dismissing their own cases. And this one magistrate judge, and we've been seeing other magistrate judges and federal judges just going through the history of these cases. I'm giving you DC. I'll talk about a case in LA, for example, as well, where a case will be filed, dismissed without prejudice, refiled, dismissed without prejudice, refiled, dismissed with prejudice, because the moment the DOJ meets resistance, it doesn't have the staffing, number one. It often is bringing cases the same way, you know, obviously the Comey case and the Letitia James case are high profile examples of the malfeasance and missteps. By the way, we haven't talked about those in a while, right? With this DOJ, you know, unable to secure an indictment of James after trying two more times, one in Norfolk and one in Alexandria. And we haven't even heard, you know, anything about Comey, but it's not just like those high profile cases, right? This is happening writ large in DC, in Virginia, in California, in a case recently in LA, where a protester was charged with very serious crimes on tape, you know, and the jury's like, nah, we just don't trust you, DOJ. You know, in addition to the people leaving the DOJ and quitting, in addition to the fact that the leaders of the specific offices, the United States attorneys who lead the offices in different districts, that they're incompetent, the people who know what they're doing have left the office. Also, people in this country perceive the DOJ as being a kind of an illegitimate entity at this point. And it's a sad thing for a once proud entity. People don't trust anything. I mean, people are obviously following, for example, the Epstein files and the cover up there. So just imagine you're a criminal defense lawyer where in your closing, you don't even have to invoke, say, Epstein, because you'll probably get an objection that it may not have anything to do with your case unless it's a sex trafficking case. But imagine you're giving a closing argument to the jury that's so familiar with the Epstein cover up and all of these missteps and every cover up that this DOJ and FBI is engaged in right now, right? And you just go to the, you know, maybe in your voir dire when you're picking a jury, you'll find out that, you know, the jury doesn't really, you could plant a seed that they don't really trust this DOJ. Then in your closing, you could say, look, this is a weaponized DOJ that's going after my client. They obviously have a political agenda in everything they do. They don't like my client because fill in the blank, X, Y, and Z. My client's in this industry, that industry. And Donald Trump's out there basically saying he hates everybody unless you bribe him, unless you give him money, unless you give him a quid pro quo. People get that. And there's a way to message that also in cases that resonate with juries, where even if it's a good case, the people they're not getting their conviction rate. Let's bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds Substack, Talking Feds podcast, and Talking Feds YouTube. And Harry, it's also the underlying prosecutions themselves, as the Trump regime has turned all of its resources to like go after people who have been in this country for like decades and pulling people off of roofs, like the roofers and farmers, and like, I don't know, they're spending their resources. They are not pursuing drug trafficking, sex trafficking, child trafficking, espionage, public integrity. They don't even know what public integrity means anymore over there. Financial fraud cases. And then when they do one, like they did an antitrust criminal case against a concert ticketing company, and then the guy he's friends with Kushner, and then right after they charge and build up the file, Trump pardons the guy, and we're seeing that over and over again. So you were a former United States attorney in Pennsylvania. You were a former top Justice Department official. They're cooked, huh? This DOJ is cooked. What do you make of it?
It's, as you're saying, starting with 3 to 4 times as many departures, but that really understates the overall impact for many of the reasons you're saying, and then more, Ben. So let me tell you, you're right, and thanks for mentioning my experience both at Maine Justice and in U.S. attorneys' offices. And the way it works, the way it always has worked, is there's a really thin cadre of, 2 or 3 or 6 or whatever, real go-to people in the individual offices and at Maine Justice. The real sort of, repository of institutional information who knows what's going on. And they have been disproportionately forced out. So, typically the 1/3 that it would be people who have done their 5 or 6 years and go into private practice, say, but some people stay and become the real and want to be institutional knowledge of the place and are huge and are hugely relied on. So problem one that means this is all understated is those people are disproportionately left among the people who have departed the DOJ. Problem two is a lot of similar people have just been warehoused purposely by this administration to really useless kind of outposts. For instance, maybe they are dealing with the new initiative in the Civil Rights Division about universities pursuing diversity, whatever. They are out of the action and purposely out of the action. The third point, the people who remain, you have, whispers that come out again and again. They're not doing anything either because they're not being given anything to do because no one trusts them, or some of the cases are so completely antithetical to why they came to the department that they're just sort of pushing paper. And then fourth, the numbers that have been lost come disproportionately from places that were previously so vital and the crown jewels of the department and its work. Civil Rights Division is a big one. You mentioned public integrity. It went from 30 or so at the point where that now Judge Emile Beauvais shut the door on them and said somebody here is going to sign the dismissal in the Mayor Adams case, or everyone's losing their job. It went from 30 then to 2, and 2 that don't even get to do their work. So all this is by way of saying that the numbers, which are themselves astonishing, don't begin to tell the story of the actual loss of competence, efficiency, institutional knowledge. And then your point is yet another, that what remains behind from this now sort of skeletal crew is to do at least a big chunk of cases that are garbage. Besides that they're politically driven, they're garbage cases. They're dog cases. The Letitia James case is not only politically driven, but not coincidentally, it's a ridiculous case involving hardly any loss. The guy who throws the subway at the ICE agent, it's a ridiculous case. And that also resulted in a loss. And this is happening now more and more around the country. And then finally, and heartbreakingly, I when we talk about this stuff, but my fuddy-duddy side comes out, but it was such a honor that people felt and took to heart, and juries listened to and judges listened to. Harry Litman for the United States, anyone for the United States, that meant something. And now, after so much erosion, and we're talking in 10 short months or so, you have court after court saying, we don't trust you anymore. It just happened yesterday. That Judge Zinnes totally excoriated the department in the Abrego Garcia case, and you have juries at record paces. You never used to see no true bills. Now they're coming weekly. So all of this takes what is that big number for starters and multiplies it in many ways for a much less happy, much less efficient, much less knowledgeable, and much less sort of serving of the public Department of Justice. And man, oh man, what a mess it's going to be to try to, we should have such problems, knock on wood, but when the day comes to try to repair the damage, it's going to be like an post-apocalyptic landscape.
Yeah, everybody knows it's very hard to build a law firm now, just in general, that has staying power and that can keep a reputation. The DOJ, like a big cruise ship, if you will, is the biggest law firm out there, if you think about it in those terms, with one of the strongest reputations before all of this. And you could quibble and disagree with certain charging decisions. And of course, like any organization, has its scandals and its problems and its issues, no doubt. But in general, it was a place that was a highlight of people's career to work at. It was generally viewed amongst the legal community as impenetrable in terms of its ultimately its integrity and the fortress around it, the people of the United States or the USA versus a person that meant something. And now it actually means like you go against these federal judges are looking at the people in front of them like they're looking at a lawyer who's been facing high profile issues with the local bar. Basically, this guy's going, okay, what are you trying to sell me right now? And that's just where we're at, and it's a sad state of it, but it is the state of it, and what we report on, Harry, right?
There you have it. Sad understates it, Ben. It's, if you talk to anyone who used to work at the DOJ and everything that made it great, and in such short order, they, took a meat grinder and half to the whole place. And now, again, the final point I sort of made it in passing last time, just the survivors, the people who are there, are in a kind of shell shock, not being able to do good work. The place is a disaster.
Everybody, make sure you subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel. If you were wondering why is it called Talking Feds, because it's former feds who talk from the DOJ.
It used to be anyway. That was our origin. Now we
that was the origin.
You're right.
That was the origin. Top former federal prosecutor. So subscribe there on YouTube, Talking Feds Substack, and Talking Feds podcast. And of course, subscribe here on the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you, Ben. Happy holidays to everyone.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.